The night was thick with tension, the air heavy with the stench of gasoline and sweat. Mike Tyson walked out of the dimly lit gym, his muscles still pulsing from the brutal training session. His fists, legendary weapons of destruction, hung loosely at his sides as he stepped onto the cracked pavement of Brooklyn. Then came the red and blue lights, flashing like sirens of doom. "Hands where we can see them," barked the voice, cold and filled with hate. Tyson turned slowly, his eyes locking onto two officers stepping out of a black and white cruiser. One was young, nervous, his hand twitching over his holstered gun. The other, older, with a smirk carved into his face, like he was enjoying this too much. "Late night stroll, champ?" the older cop sneered. "Or you looking for trouble?" Tyson didn't flinch. He had seen this before. The abuse, the power trips, the thinly veiled racism. He knew how this played out. "I'm just heading home," Tyson said, voice calm, but his muscles coiled like a spring. "Not anymore, you ain't," the cop chuckled, stepping closer. "You fit the description of someone who just knocked over a liquor store." Tyson's blood boiled. "That so?" Before the cop could answer, the sound of screeching tires cut through the night. A black Cadillac slid to a stop, its chrome rims flashing under the streetlights. The doors swung open and out stepped three men, gangsters, their suits sharp but their eyes sharper. "You boys harassing my friend here?" The leader spoke, his voice smooth as silk, but laced with venom. The cops stiffened. Everyone in this neighborhood knew who these men were. They weren't just criminals, they were untouchable. The older cop spat on the ground. "This ain't your business." "Oh, but it is," the gangster smiled. "See Tyson here? He's one of us. A legend. And you too? You're just pest." Tyson clenched his fists. He didn't want their help. He didn't need it. But in this moment he was caught between two evils. The dirty cops who saw him as nothing more than a target, and the gangsters who wanted to pull him into their world. The tension thickened. Fingers twitched over triggers. And then, Tyson moved. Fast as lightning, his fist shot out, smashing into the older cop's face with the force of a sledgehammer. The man crumpled like a house of cards. The younger cop fumbled for his gun, but Tyson was already on him, snatching the weapon and tossing it into the gutter. The gangsters laughed. "Damn Iron Mike, you still got it." Tyson turned, his gaze ice cold. "I don't work for you." The leader chuckled. "Maybe not yet." Tyson walked away, his heartbeat steady, his mind clear. He had made enemies tonight, on both sides. The cops wouldn't forget. The gangsters wouldn't stop. But he didn't care. Because he was Mike Tyson. And no one owned him. Tyson's boots echoed on the cracked pavement as he walked away from the chaos. The adrenaline still surged through his veins, but his mind stayed sharp. He knew this wasn't over. The cops would come for him. The gangsters wouldn't let him walk away that easily. Brooklyn was a battlefield, and tonight he had stepped right into the crossfire. He reached his apartment, a rundown building with graffiti-covered walls and flickering hallway lights. He unlocked the door, stepped inside, and locked it behind him. His fists ached from the punch, but his gut told him that was just the beginning. Bang, 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 bang. A heavy knock rattled the door. Tyson tensed. He moved to the side, out of the direct line of fire. "Who is it?" Silence. Then a voice, low, smooth, dangerous. "Open up, champ. Let's talk." The gangsters. Tyson exhaled, rolling his shoulders. He had fought monsters in the ring, but these men were a different breed. He opened the door just enough to see the leader from earlier, flanked by two enforcers in black suits. "You made a hell of a mess out there," the man said, grinning. "The cops ain't gonna forget that." "Neither are you," Tyson shot back. The man chuckled. "Smart. I like that. But let's be real, those dirty cops are coming for you. Art. And when they do, you're gonna need protection. We can offer that." Tyson's jaw tightened. "I don't need your help." "Maybe not now," the gangster mused, lighting a cigarette. "But when they drag you in, beat you half to death, and pin a crime on you, you might wish you had friends in the right places." Smoke curled in the air. The enforcers watched Tyson, waiting. Tyson met the leader's gaze. "I fight my own battles." The gangster smirked. "Suit yourself, champ. But remember, this city doesn't care how fast your hands are. It only cares who's got the power. And right now, that ain't you." With that, the men turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. Tyson closed the door, his heartbeat steady. He had made his choice. He wasn't a puppet for the gangsters. He wasn't a victim for the cops. But as he stared out the window at the flashing red and blue lights approaching from the distance, he knew the war was just beginning. Tyson didn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the walls of his cramped apartment. Outside, the city breathed in sirens and violence, a rhythm he knew all too well. He had spent his life fighting inside the ring, but out here, the rules didn't exist. The front door exploded inward, the cheap wood splintering under the force of a steel-toed boot. Flashlights cut through the darkness. Down on the ground now, Tyson didn't move. His pulse was steady, his body coiled. 4 cops stormed inside, all in riot gear, all itching for a fight. At the front was the younger officer from earlier, his face twisted in anger. The older one, his nose still broken from Tyson's fist, was missing, probably still nursing his wounds. "Thought you could sucker punch a cop and walk away?" the young officer snarled. "You're done, Tyson." 2 of them rushed him. Tyson reacted instantly. His right hand shot out, grabbing the first cop by the wrist. With a sharp twist, he sent the man flying into the wall. The second lunged, swinging his baton. Tyson ducked, driving an uppercut into the cop's ribs. The man collapsed, gasping for air. The younger officer drew his gun. "Don't move." Tyson froze, hands clenched into fists. The barrel of the Glock was steady, the officer's finger hovering over the trigger. "Big man," the cop sneered. "Tough guy. Let's see how tough you are when you're locked in a cage." Tyson's breath slowed. He could charge, he could take the risk. But a gun was a gun. Even the best fighters couldn't dodge bullets. "Turn around," the officer ordered. Tyson exhaled, his jaw tightening. He started to turn. Then, boom. A gunshot rang through the apartment. Not from the cop. The window shattered as a bullet tore through the room, striking the officer in the shoulder. He screamed, stumbling backward. The other cops ducked, scrambling for cover. Outside, a black Cadillac idled at the curb, its passenger window down. Smoke curled from the barrel of a pistol. The gangsters. Tyson didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, snatching the officer's fallen gun. In 2 quick strides, he was out the door, sprinting down the fire escape as chaos erupted behind him. The Cadillac's door swung open. "Get in," the leader called. Tyson hesitated. Sirens wailed in the distance. The streets were closing in. His enemies were everywhere. He had no choice. Grinding his teeth, he climbed into the car. The door slammed shut, the tires screeched, and Brooklyn blurred past as the underworld swallowed him whole. The city seemed to pulse as they sped through the streets, the hum of the engine a constant in the otherwise quiet chaos. Tyson's mind raced. He hadn't asked for this. All he wanted was to be left alone, to leave behind the shadows that clung to him. But now he was tangled in a web of corruption, violence, and power. The gangsters had pulled him in, and the cops were on his trail. There was no way out. The Cadillac slid to a stop in front of an unmarked building, a dilapidated warehouse hidden in a forgotten corner of the city. The leader got out first, flanked by his enforcers, and Tyson followed, feeling the weight of the gun at his side. "Welcome to our little slice of paradise," the gangster said with a grin, his voice dripping with menace. Tyson didn't respond. He kept his eyes sharp, his mind calculating. He knew what this was, a trap. They were going to use him, break him, turn him into a pawn in their game. But Tyson wasn't anyone's pawn. "Let's cut to the chase," the gangster said, leaning against a rusted container. "We know you've got a reputation, Tyson. And we need someone with that kind of muscle to help us handle some business." "I don't do business with scum like you," Tyson snapped, his voice low and dangerous. The gangster's smile never wavered. "Oh, I think you will. See, we're at war with the cops. And you're the perfect leverage. You take down a few of them for us, get the heat off our backs, and we'll make sure you walk free. No charges, no consequences. Just you, your fists, and all the freedom you could want." Tyson's fists clenched. He could feel the temptation gnawing at him, the chance to end it all, to disappear into the shadows and forget everything. But deep down he knew the price would be too high. "I don't need your offer," Tyson growled. "I'm not your weapon." The gangster's grin faltered, his eyes narrowing. "You don't get it, do you? You don't have a choice. Either you work for us or you'll end up like the others." Tyson's heart pounded in his chest. He knew what the others meant, those who had crossed them, the ones who had vanished, the ones who were never seen again. But Tyson wasn't afraid of the dark. He had survived too much to let fear rule him. Before the gangster could say another word, Tyson lunged. His fist exploded in a blur of motion, knocking the man's gun out of his hand. In an instant he was on him, pinning him against the wall. The enforcers moved to draw their weapons, but Tyson was faster. A punch here, a kick there, and they were all on the ground, writhing in pain. "Don't underestimate me," Tyson growled, his breath coming in ragged bursts. The gangster gasped for air, his face pale. You're crazy. You're gonna regret this." Tyson stepped back, his eyes cold as ice. "I've already lost everything. What more is there to regret?" With a final glance at the crumpled bodies on the floor, Tyson turned and walked out of the warehouse, the door slamming shut behind him. The Cadillac's engine roared to life, but this time Tyson wasn't getting in. He was done running. But as he disappeared into the night, a new thought gnawed at him. This fight wasn't just with the cops or the gangsters. This war was personal, and it was coming for him no matter how fast or far he ran. The real battle had just begun. The streets felt different now. The city's pulse had shifted. What once seemed like the chaotic hum of Brooklyn's underbelly now felt suffocating, like a storm was brewing on the horizon. Tyson didn't know if it was the gangsters he had just betrayed, the crooked cops who were still gunning for him, or something deeper. Whatever it was, he felt it in his bones. He was no longer a fighter in the ring. He was a man marked by two enemies, each more dangerous than the last. He couldn't run forever. Tyson's mind raced as he walked the empty alleyways, his senses honed, every shadow a potential threat. The streets were empty now, too empty. He heard the hum of an engine in the distance, the sound of tires squealing against wet pavement. A black SUV turned the corner. Four men in suits. Tyson's stomach twisted. It wasn't the cops. It wasn't the gangsters. These men were something different, something worse. Before he could react, the SUV screeched to a halt in front of him. The doors swung open and two men stepped out, their faces cold and unreadable. Tyson's hand instinctively dropped to the gun at his side. "Mike Tyson?" the taller man asked, his voice clipped. Tyson didn't answer, his gaze locked on the men. The shorter one, a pit bull of a man, grinned. "We don't want trouble, Tyson. We just want to talk." "Talk? Then talk," Tyson said, his voice low, a growl simmering beneath the words. The tall man stepped forward, the glint of something metallic catching Tyson's eye. "We work for a third party. Someone who knows your value. Someone who can make all your problems disappear." Tyson's lip curled into a sneer. "I don't need anyone fixing my problems." "Don't be so sure," the short man said. "You've crossed some dangerous people. The cops, the gangsters, they all have their eyes on you. And you're a dead man walking unless you make the right choice." The tall man pulled out a file, thin, worn. He opened it slowly, revealing a photo of Tyson from a fight long ago, but something was wrong. The image was old, faded, but the annotations were clear. Names, dates, connections. It was a hit list. Tyson felt his pulse quicken. "Who the hell are you people?" The tall man's lips curled. "We're the ones who clean up messes, Mr. Tyson. And right now you're a mess." Before Tyson could move, the short man lunged. His hand was fast, too fast, but Tyson was faster. He ducked and swung a brutal right hook, sending the man crashing to the ground. The tall man's eyes widened, but he didn't flinch. "You're making a mistake." Tyson's blood boiled. "The only mistake I'm making is standing here listening to you." He lunged, but before he could land another blow, a high-pitched whistle pierced the air. The tall man held up a small device, pressing a button. A sharp, electric crackle filled the alley. Tyson's body froze as an intense shock coursed through him, knocking him to his knees. His muscles seized, his vision blurred. The world spun as the pain flared through every nerve ending. "Not so tough now, are you?" the tall man taunted, his voice a distant echo. Tyson struggled to breathe, but he couldn't move. His hands trembled as he tried to reach for his gun. He felt the heavy weight of everything. His fists, his past, and the violence that had followed him here. "You can fight all you want, Tyson," the tall man said, stepping closer. "But you can't outrun the people who are watching you. You can't outrun what's coming." Tyson's vision cleared just enough to see the short man getting back to his feet. "I don't care who's watching me," Tyson growled, his voice hoarse but strong. "I don't owe anyone a damn thing." And with that, he pushed through the pain, his body fighting against the shock. With a roar of defiance, he surged forward, breaking the restraints of the electric shock and knocking the tall man back. The short man lunged again, but this time Tyson was ready. With a swift kick, he sent him crashing into the SUV. Tyson grabbed the tall man by the collar, lifting him off the ground. "You don't get to walk away," Tyson said, voice deadly calm. "You don't get to threaten me." With one final move, Tyson threw the man against the alley wall, watching as he crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Tyson took a deep breath, his body still shaking from the pain, but the anger had pushed through. He had made it clear tonight, he wasn't anyone's pawn. But as the SUV sped away, leaving the alley behind, Tyson knew he had only just scratched the surface. The men who had approached him, the ones who thought they could control him, were just part of a much larger game. The true battle, the one that would determine everything, had just begun. The days that followed were a blur of shadowy streets, whispered threats, and the sound of sirens that never seemed to stop. Tyson's body ached from the constant battle, but his resolve was sharper than ever. His past had hunted him down, but now he was the hunter. He didn't know who the people behind the SUV were or who had sent them, but he had learned something crucial that night. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for control. Control over his life, control over his future. The weight of everything he had fought for pressed heavily on him as he stood in the doorway of his apartment. He hadn't been back to that warehouse. He hadn't looked for answers, but they were coming for him. Tonight it would end. The streets were dark when Tyson made his way to the heart of the city. The gangsters were out in full force, their grip tightening around the city like a vice. And the cops, well, they weren't much better. Corrupt, dangerous, and willing to turn a blind eye to everything except power. Tyson had learned that power was a game of perception. People feared what they couldn't control, and that was what made them dangerous. But Tyson was done being controlled. He found the building. It was an old, abandoned factory on the outskirts of town, one the gangsters used for their deals. But tonight, it wasn't the gangsters he was after. Tonight, it was the men who thought they could pull his strings. The ones behind the SUV. Tyson didn't knock. He didn't announce his presence. He slipped inside through a cracked window, his senses on high alert. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of dust and decay. In the far corner of the warehouse, a few men were standing near a stack of crates, talking in low voices. Without hesitation, Tyson moved. He was a blur, fast, focused, and deadly. The first man didn't even see him coming before he was on the floor, his head slammed into the concrete. Tyson took out the next with a swift punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of him. The third man turned, reaching for his gun, but Tyson was already there, his hand wrapped around the man's throat before he could even draw. The last man was standing alone at the far end of the room. The tall one. The one who had threatened him. Tyson stepped forward, his eyes cold and unwavering. The man turned slowly, his smug grin faltering as he recognized the danger in Tyson's eyes. "You," the man began, his voice trembling. "Shut up," Tyson cut him off, his voice a growl. "I'm done listening to your lies." The man raised his hands in surrender. "You don't have to do this. We can." Tyson was on him in an instant. His fist slammed into the man's chest, knocking the air out of him. He didn't stop there. He grabbed him by the collar, lifting him off the ground. "I don't work for anyone," Tyson spat. "Not you. Not the cops. Not the gangsters. I don't need anyone's help. And I sure as hell don't need anyone telling me how to live." With one final shove, Tyson threw the man against the wall, watching as he slid to the floor, unconscious. Tyson stood there for a moment, chest heaving, blood still pumping through his veins. This wasn't the end of his problems, but it was the beginning of his freedom. He had made his choice. He wasn't a tool for anyone's war. He was his own man, and he'd fight on his terms. As he turned to leave the warehouse, he could hear the sirens growing louder, but they didn't scare him anymore. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. The streets might have been dark, but Tyson was the storm. And as the city's skyline faded behind him, he knew one thing for sure. No one would ever control him again.